Welcome back everybody. Now I'm sure all of us with camper trailers are used to this view in our rear vision mirror while we're traveling down the road. I don't think there's too many of us that haven't experienced the front bag flying up and flapping around in the wind as we're traveling to our next destination. Well, in this episode, I've come up with a real simple solution to secure these corners down, to hold it securely in place and stop it flapping about while you're on the road. So come along and I'll show you how quick and easy this really is. Now this little project is extremely easy and it certainly won't break the bank. You simply want to get these shock cord loops, which you can get from any canvas supplier. In our case, we got them from the boat warehouse. You can get these in white and black. They're a 110mm loop, and most importantly, they're a press style fitting. So you get this little button here, which simply clips through the material that you're fixing these onto and presses into the back of the fixing. You'll notice that Bunnings and some tonneau manufacturers also sell these in a very similar configuration. However, they're made to be either screw fixed or riveted onto the material or body that they're going onto. That actually complicates things a little bit because you then have a big washer on the back, and when we're trying to fix one end of these onto the bag itself, it's not really the easiest solution. So get one with the little button that presses through, which will go into, and you'll be on your way. The next item you'll need is the shock cord button, which is something like this. These I actually got from Bunnings because the boat warehouse only sold the black ones. So if you've got a newer model with the black trims, you would obviously use black, but Bunnings have these in the white, which will work perfectly. And don't forget, as per all my projects, I'll put a full list in the description below with links to everything I've used in all my projects. And to fix this button onto the end cap, I've got these white 4mm HG screws, which you also get from Bunnings. I did look to fix these on with some bolts and nylock nuts with a big washer on the back, just to make it a little bit more sturdy. However, you'll find the hole in these is really quite small, and trying to find a head that will fit inside this meant that at the end of the day, the hardware was really quite small and minimal at best. So I've opted to continue with the Phillips head screw. It's white, it will match the button and tie it all in nicely. What we will do, however, to make this all nice and secure is that we will put some sealant onto the back face of the button when we fix it onto the side of the van, so that it's got a bonded fixing as well as a screw to hold it on. And I will be using the trusty Bostik V4 Silicone, which I've used in most of my projects recently. And you'll know that I'm not a great fan of using polyurethane sealants for sealing up caravans and camper trailers. However, in this instance, I would recommend that a polyurethane adhesive would work quite well to bond this onto the side of the van. You can get them from Bunnings, such as a Sika 291, which is the marine grade adhesive. You can get them in the large tubes just like this, and also the smaller tube that you simply squeeze out, such as this, which would actually be perfect for the job. However, I've still got some of this silicone sealant, so I'm simply going to use this. And also note, because we're fixing onto the end cap, it's not that critical to seal it, as it's actually the outside of the canvas. So all we're trying to do is increase the sturdiness of this button fixing onto the side of the van. And of course, you also need a drill with an appropriately sized drill bit. I'm using a 2mm drill bit to make sure we're not making the hole too big. So let's get over and get this job done. Now, before we get into this, I thought I'd run through a few things that come up quite often with these bags, just to give a few tips and tricks. Firstly, these are actually removable. You can simply remove a screw from either end and these will slide out of the sail track. With all the wet weather we've had lately, I'm sure a lot are realizing that water and moisture somehow gets into these bags. And when you go to pull the awning out, you'll notice it's quite wet, even when it's been sealed up inside this bag over a period of time. This is partly contributed to leakage through the seams up on the top and also through the zipper itself, from what I can see, because the material itself should be reasonably water resistant. And when it comes to looking after these, there's a few little tips and tricks, so I'll bring you in a little bit closer and I'll quickly run through them as well. Firstly, a few cleaning tips that we've discovered along the way to help you out. With these bag awnings themselves, we find that the 30 seconds cleanup works brilliantly. Simply unzip it, roll it out, give it a spray with this, a little bit of a scrub if you need to, hose it off, and then towel dry, and it comes up incredibly well. With the covers, they tend to get a little bit stained as well, and that's where Jif comes in really handy. Simply put a little bit on, give it a scrub with a microfiber, and they come up really, really well. And now you'll notice that we've still got our straps. I've actually done a repair on these a few years ago and it's lasted incredibly well. So let's head over there before we do the final secure down. And I'll run through a few methods that people have been using to secure these down so they're not flapping about in transit. Now our van's moderately old, I would call it. It's a 2013 model. And when we got it, these straps had perished and were missing off the bottom. Like most, we simply have the top one remaining, which is stitched into the bag itself. And that in itself poses a bit of an issue. To get these repaired correctly with new webbing and clips, you really need to take the bags off to a canvas repairer or a motor trimmer, and they can stitch on new straps and webbing for you. So we're fortunate enough that our Swan is stored inside for the time being. We need to get the Journey in here, but it doesn't quite fit through the doors. So for now, the Swan is nice and safe inside. If these are stored outside, obviously you've got the sun, the rain, and all the other environmental factors that perish the webbing and also the plastic on these clips, and they deteriorate, and through the stresses of driving down the road will fail and fall off. Another theory I've got is that these bags moving up and down will actually erode the webbing and wear through it, which is another failure point, which results in them fraying and breaking off. So now if we look under here, I did a fix a few years ago that has lasted incredibly well. You can buy new webbing and clips from Bunnings. Again, I'll put these in the description below. And what you do is you get a Tek screw and a large oversized washer. And at this point here, we've actually got this strap doubled up. It runs through the new clip like so, and then folds over on itself. So we've got 4 points that this fixing is running through into the front panel of the van. What that does is that provides a second fixing point, noting that the original webbing was secured only through the seam along the top of the bag awning itself, and that will actually stop the bag wanting to lift and rotate while you're in transit. They work pretty well, but I do find that the corners are still moving up while in transit, which is leading us into the modification I'm about to do. Now, when it comes to trying to keep these bags all nicely secured down onto the van so that they're not flapping about like that, some people will use straps to secure down onto the front A-frame or gas bottles or whatever you have on the front of your van. I'm not really a huge fan of that. Others will use their poles and either put them inside the bag or roll them up with the awning, which actually makes it a lot easier if you're trying to pack these away by yourself. And they use the weight of these poles to try to keep the bag down so that, again, it's not flapping around while you're in transit. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this, primarily because it's adding a whole heap of extra weight into the bag, which is stressing out all the seams, particularly along where it connects into the van via the sail track. Hence, I've done this strap mod, which has worked incredibly well over the years. And now I'm looking to improve that by securing the corners down. So let's get into that. And before I put the bag down, I'll quickly run through the process of what we're going to do here. We're going to fix this button here onto the side of the corner cap in a location below the canvas. So any holes we make through this portion of the corner cap technically don't need to be sealed. It's exactly the same as the screw fixings down here. They technically don't need to be sealed. However, I like to run some sealant through just in case, because the canvas is free under these areas, and this is actually the outside area before you get into the internals of the camper trailer itself. So if we flip this bag back down, I'm actually looking to fit this loop onto an area somewhere on the upper portion of the bag so that it pulls this corner down so it's not flapping around, and it's resistant to some of the wind forces that you get on these corners. So if you get this cord loop here and put it on the corner, I can pull it down, which would probably be the best place from a leverage point of view. However, the shock cord itself will be rubbing on the zipper on the corner of the bag. So I'm thinking that we'll put it somewhere here, which will still pull into a nice little spot, but there's a little bit of room in here that it will push in, and you've got the seams which actually sit over the zipper so that we don't have so much friction wear on the back of this shock cord itself. So I'll quickly unzip the bag so we get access to the inside. We'll secure this on and then look at locating the button onto the corner cap where it can securely fix this down. I'm also going to release all 4 latches and pop the roof up a little bit so that we've got access from underneath this roof cap. So you want it just enough that you can get up underneath just to check that you're not drilling into any of the canvas itself. And with the roof up a little bit, you'll feel that there's nothing in behind other than this corner cap itself, which is perfect for the installation we're trying to do here today. Next, I'm going to measure down from the zipper seam on both sides so that I've got this mounting point roughly in the same spot on both sides. So I've measured 8 centimeters down from this zipper seam, which seems about the perfect location to mount the button so that we're not having to deal with the corner and the friction on the cord itself. And now before we go making any holes, just check that this cord will actually work in that location. I think anywhere between 7 and 8 centimeters will be just fine, but check it in your particular instance, as I'm sure these bag covers do change quite a bit over the years. And now for the scary bit. I'm just going to pierce a small hole in through the bag vinyl itself. And I've got a little sharp tool here. You could potentially use a knife just to cut a little slit, or even a screwdriver just to pierce through. But this makes it so that I can point it down through the vinyl. I've actually put the main fitting just outside of the seam so that this button will click in nice and firm and not sitting on the zipper seam itself, which might stop it from clicking fully into place. And we will now remove the button. And now that the hole's been located, you'll probably have to open up a tiny little bit. And you can do that a number of ways. One would be to actually cut this slightly just to allow enough for this to push through. Another option is to get a punch and put a little piece of timber in behind and punch that out to open this hole up. However, now that you've got the hole located, open it up large enough to be able to push this through without being loose. You still want some friction on it, and then we can do the final assembly. And you can see I've made a hole in through the vinyl cover so that I can push this button in and through like so. You can see it just there. And then we can clip this upper stay put button on over the top. You'll hear it click, and it's now secured onto the bag cover itself. And now, so that we can locate the button correctly, we'll zip all this back up. And then we can look at locating this so that it can secure the bag down and not allow this nylon loop to fly off during transit. So it's a simple case of getting the button, putting it through the nylon loop, and then locating it onto the side of the corner cap. I want to bring it in as far as I can, as these corner caps do have issues with cracking, so that it sits within the webbing that you'll notice inside the corner cap structure itself. And somewhere around about here feels pretty good. Now we just want to mark this location, drill a hole, and then we can look at securing it onto the side of the corner cap itself. Now, I'm an architect in a past life, so I have a pile of these red pens, but I find they're really handy with this fine tip to put through and locate the center for where we need to drill our pilot hole. And the red makes it incredibly easy to see on most surfaces, including black, as opposed to using a black pen on black surfaces. And I'm pretty accustomed to marking things up in red anyhow. So now we're just going to drill this hole, dab a bit of sealant onto the back of this button itself, and we'll also run some sealant through the screws so that we can fasten this into the side of the cap. And you want to do this a few days before you head down the road so that this has time to secure and set onto the side of the corner cap. So we'll just put a little dollop of silicone onto the back of the button. You don't need a huge amount because that will just squish out and make a mess when you're trying to screw it into place. And I'll also just wind the screw in to get a little bit of sealant onto the end of it. And we'll fix it into place. And before you mount this button, make sure you give the surface a good wipe over with some isopropyl cleaning alcohol or metho, just to make sure it's all ready to go and that you've got a good mating surface for your adhesive or silicone. And now you want to remove any residual sealant off the outside of the button itself. I'm lucky I've got some silicone finishing fluid, however you can just use some soapy water. Run your finger around. And as per all my other videos, it's a good idea to have a few sheets of paper towel ready so that you can wipe your fingers off. And if you don't want to make a real mess, put some gloves on. These screws are almost the perfect length. They just sit out a tiny little bit past the rib inside. So what I am going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of silicone onto my finger, only a tiny little bit, and just spread that around the tip of the screw where you can feel it inside the corner cap here, just to make sure that there's no pointy bits which might get caught up with your vinyl when you're packing down or in transit. You don't want to make a real mess of this. It's just a simple case of just wiping a little bit inside just to cover that over, just to provide that extra little bit of security to know that the job's done right. You'll notice there'll be a little bit of sealant that seeps through the inside of the fixing. It's a good idea just to put a screwdriver in, just to clean up the head of the screw a little bit so that it's easier to get back out if you need to down the track. I would leave this overnight now. Don't go putting this cord on. You want this to dry in place without any pressure on it. And then the end of the next day, you can secure these on and you're ready to roll. So now I'll just pop over to the other side and do the same, and the job's done. And with everything all nicely cured, it's a simple case of just popping this over onto the button and it's all nice and secure for your trip away. And no longer do you need to look in the rear vision mirror and see this bag flapping around in the wind behind you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's been on my list for a very long time, and it just goes to show how quick and easy some of these projects are, and they make such a huge difference to the performance of these camper trailers. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, put a few comments down below, and don't forget to like the video, as that helps us greatly with YouTube. Now, the next upcoming episode is a bit of a tricky one. We had to replace the door on our Jayco journey, so I flipped it right on its head and decided to upgrade our tacky white water filler with a shiny new black one to blend it in through the side. And you'll notice I also changed the black fridge vent to make it all nicey nice and matching the black wheels that we upgraded to a few episodes ago. So stay tuned for that one. It runs you through how to replace the door if you do lose it in transit, and also goes through the process of pulling this whole water filler assembly out and putting it back in. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as I always say, get out there, stay safe and have fun. We'll catch you next time.